Voice is
Yeah.
such a signature. It's like your DNA. It's so complicated. It's not just word choice and humor and expression. And it's so many things, just like wine is. It'll take as long for Chat GPT or the other tools to really come out with stunning literature as long as it would take AI to come up with like Chateau Margaux, perfectly aged with the right amount of oak. It's such an artisanal thing. That said, I do think whether you're a writer or not, it's worth getting to know and use the tools and see how they can assist you. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 277. Why don't I think that artificial intelligence, AI, will replace human writers anytime soon? What are some tips that you can use for maintaining a healthy relationship with wine? And what are some of the challenges that women in the wine industry still face? In today's episode, you'll hear the stories and tips that answer those questions in my chat with Ellen Clifford, who hosts the Wine Situation podcast. Ellen is interviewing me in this one. Speaking of AI not replacing writers, or at least not yet, have you read Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much? If yes, then have you bought a copy for a friend? A real human friend. If you'd like to support this podcast that I do for you on a volunteer basis to ensure it continues, please order it from any online book retailer, no matter where you live. It usually arrives in a day or two, and of course the ebook is instant and it's a fast read. Every little bit helps spread the message in this book of hope, justice, and resilience. You can send a copy directly to a friend or family member and make their day when a gift arrives in the mail, rather than all those grocery store flyers that they don't read anyway. I'll put a link in the show notes to all retailers worldwide at nataliemclean.com/277. If you've read the book or are reading it, I'd love to hear from you at natalie@nataliemclean.com. Okie dokie, on with the show. Natalie McLean, our guest for today, who wrote Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. It is a really good book. It's a memoir of a bit of a trial she went through with wine. We'll talk more about that. We'll talk about women in wine. We'll talk about her life. She's delightful. I really enjoyed talking to her. So yeah, let's just get to it. Season 8, Episode 1. Enjoy this interview with Natalie McLean. Natalie, welcome to the Wine Situation. Hey, Elle, it's great to be here with you. How's life up there? And you're in Canada. I am in Canada, in Ottawa, our nation's capital, where it's crisp and refreshing, like a well-chilled Riesling. We get a lot of snow here. It's colder on average than Moscow. We are the world's coldest capital. Anyway. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Not to dwell. Hopefully you are staying warm. Oh, yes. Lots of wine. I thoroughly enjoyed reading your Wine Witch book. It kept me going on a flight from Italy, a long flight. I was like, yes, something to read that's actually good. So thank you for that. Great. It's your third book, right? It is, yes. It's quite a departure from the first two, but yeah, book number 3. It's more of a memoir in style. Are the first two less so? Or yeah, exactly. Before we go more into that, I kind of, what my guests love to kind of go begin at the beginning with you and wine. Was wine around in your life growing up? Was it on the table? No, it wasn't. I grew up in a really small family. My mother and she was a single parent. She'd been divorced since I was 2. She was a school teacher, small East Coast town.
And although I had lots of cousins and relatives, so being from good Scottish ilk, it was always beer and whiskey on the table. And I found both of them way too bitter. I didn't actually get into wine until my late 20s. So,
Oh.
and then I made up for lost time.
So then you worked in tech, right?
I did, yeah. Worked for a supercomputer company that made the workstations on which they did like special effects for Jurassic Park and Twister and The Mask
Oh.
and movies like that. And then it got purchased, and the campus in Mountain View, California, is now the headquarters of Google.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So are you handy with computers? Are you a coder? Was that kind of what was
No,
your
I'm a wannabe coder. I am a geek, a double geek. Like I love tech. I listen to tech podcasts. I don't know why I'm not in the industry anymore, but I love listening and I love like to listen to what's going on with AI and all these other things. But I'm not a coder. I was in their marketing group, and Napa and Sonoma were just an hour's drive away. So I didn't have time or didn't make time for many hobbies or other pursuits, but I did get to know wine, not only because I started arranging meetings on a Friday and would drive up to wine country on the weekend, but also the only really leisure activity I had was, sometimes going out to dinner with clients or business meetings. And of course, choosing from the wine list was always a thing. So I gradually wanted to learn more about wine so I didn't feel so nervous and self-conscious about it.
How did you go about that?
Well, when I went off on maternity leave with my first and only son, I, of course, had not taken any vacation, being a type A personality that had all accrued over the years. And with the company, for every 4 years you worked there, you got 6 weeks paid leave to do something.
Oh,
Yeah, very Google-ish idea, like to
very cool
make
perk.
sure. Yeah. And so I had almost a year off in paid leave. Before I went on mat leave, though, I had taken a sommelier program at night just for fun. So my education was slow and awkward, but I continued with that. My husband just wanted to take the introductory course, but I kept going through the full sommelier certificate program, again, just for fun at night here in Ontario. So it's recognized by the Ministry of Education. So it does give you a diploma when you're done, but
Yeah.
it's not the diploma perhaps that you're thinking of, but it was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
But I had no intention to write about it. I just, I was fascinated. And I still think to this day you could do a liberal arts degree with wine as the hub. Because as you know, Elle, like wine just ties into almost every facet of human endeavor,
Yeah.
commerce and agriculture, history and art and everything.
All the science of it too. Like, yeah, it's
Exactly.
I love about it.
Yes. And I just love the way that wine was that sort of full experience. It was not only intellectually engaging, but it also literally lit up my senses. It was a
Yeah.
full bodied, full mind experience. So I thought, I need to, have more of this to know what it is. I had that first wine where you go, ah, my gosh, what is this? And I didn't know how to describe it. It was a Brunello. And
Oh.
that sort of led me into the course. I need to have this again. So I need to know how to describe it, how to name it, and how to get it again. That's where the journey really began. And then the sommelier course, and then maternity leave. So I'd finished the sommelier course and I pitched a local small food magazine. The idea was how to find wine and food pairings on the internet. And that became a regular column that gave me confidence to cold call and pitch other editors. And I didn't go back to my tech job.
Natalie, I love that as a fellow workaholic, you took your hobby and made it work.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Like, incapable of hobbies.
Oh, I know. I
Yeah,
know.
it's a problem.
Someday we'll get to relax. We may be dead,
Yeah,
but we'll
that would be so
relax.
boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I know. But anyway, yeah. I mean, I just fell in love with it. And then I could be home with my son. Like I had this wonderful career. I could go at the pace I wanted to because I really did have to slow down on maternity leave, but I was able to balance it to the best I could. So I loved it.
Speaking of your son, when did you bring wine into his life? He's an adult.
He's an adult. He just turned 25. And he just finished the engineering program, computer engineering program at Waterloo, and he's working in artificial intelligence. So maybe I maintain my geeky ties for the sake of him, and we can still talk the same language. Yeah. But I did a very mean thing when he was 3. And that was, he was looking at the wine. He was used to seeing a wine glass in mommy's hand. And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "It's wine. Would you like to try it?" And so I wouldn't have offered if it had been a sweet wine or a dessert wine, because that would be tasting like liquid candy.
Yeah.
This was a very, very robust Shiraz Cabernet blend, lots of tannin. So you can imagine he takes a taste and he spits it out, and his tiny little red tongue is going, "Ugh, that's total yuck." So I scarred him for life on wine, because to this day, he doesn't drink.
Really? Oh, no.
Yeah, I did a job on the poor guy.
Oh, no.
So, he never really got into beer or whiskey or anything, but I never made it taboo. It was always on the family table, but he just doesn't have a taste for it. He still thinks it tastes very bitter. I mean, I've since, as an adult, when he became an adult, he's tried a few wines, but he still thinks they're terribly bitter. He probably perhaps he's also has that sensitivity to bitterness. He just does not like it.
I feel like I have somewhat of an opposite problem. Like I can't get enough bitter. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of Malort. It's like an Amaro that it's a Chicago thing that they love to give people because they make a face like it's a very herbal, very bitter thing. And I'm one of the rare people who drinks it. I'm like, I love this.
Oh, it sounds interesting. I think I'll stay away from it though.
You probably should. Yeah. That seems like a good idea, but I'm a little jealous though, because I'm like, I wish I had some super sensitive tongue.
Oh, yeah. Well, it can be a blessing and a curse, because, you also have to kind of calibrate, like if you're reviewing wines for those bitter wines that you don't like, it's like, oh, well, because for a while I would say, well, this is not that the Gewürztraminer was that bitter, but I never liked Gewürztraminer. Maybe it was too floral or something, but I would write my notes like, if you like Gewürztraminer, this is a good one. Right. Until someone emailed me and said, "What do you mean if you like Gewürztraminer?" So I had to realize, some people like different styles that are not to your personal preference.
No, you have to definitely always reviewing wine, keep that in mind. Because like we all have things like I do not love a Cabernet Franc. It's those green pepper notes are not my jam. In wine. But I'm like, I can taste one and tell if it's like a good wine. I'm like, okay, well, this is for you.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, there's lots of palates out there. So, and they're all valid, of course. As they say, the best pairing is, to pair the wine to the diner, not the dinner. So,
right. I feel like there's some moms out there who don't have that point of view. They like, or some chefs too. They're like, you will like what I tell you to like.
Exactly. And we get so uptight about food and wine pairings. Now, I teach courses on this. It's how I make my living. But I try to come from that premise of the best pairing is between you and your own palate. Experiment, have fun. If it doesn't work out, have a bun in between the wine and whatever it is you're eating. Just relax.
Right.
It's meant to be fun.
So curious, as a fellow journalist, how you feel about the advent of AI and how people are using it and what it means for our future as writers. So I'm kind of like, AI has not learned to taste wine yet at any rate. It's such a human thing, wine is. Like, I wonder where AI's place in it. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, it's early days for AI, and I've read articles where it's correctly identifying certain Bordeaux based on molecules. And
I
stuff like that. But yeah, when it comes to writing, I'm still, maybe my head is in the sand, but I mean, I'm using ChatGPT and Bard and the others.
Oh, you are? How are you utilizing them? I'm curious. The only thing I've done is out of morbid curiosity, I asked ChatGPT I said, write a article about Pinot Noir in the voice of Ellen Clifford just to see what it did. And it was terrible. And then I was like, okay, you can't replace me yet. But how are you making use of it?
I'm using it for subject lines, for newsletters, or in pitches for titles. I do find if I give it instructions, even if I keep going step after step, trying to refine it, the writing is just very blathery. It's not punchy. Even if I say, be more concise, be more punchy, I find it right now, it's taking more time to do it that way than just to write the darn thing.
Is it easier just to come up with things yourself, maybe? Or
exactly. Well, where it has been helpful, though, are the subject lines and headlines, because it knows how to package things. I was trying to pitch like articles for Galentine's, wines for Galentine's Day, the day before Valentine's Day. And it was talking about, wines for your squad and different things. Like it was different from the subject line because I couldn't get past like, okay, wines for Galentine's Day. Like that's boring. How can I get something a little bit more punchy, more creative? So that's helped, but not the full-fledged writing. And I think for those who are afraid, as writers, oh, I'm going to be replaced. I don't see that happening anytime soon. Even if, as you've discovered, write an article about Pinot in the voice of, first of all, I think if you're a writer, it's really hard to replicate your voice. Voice is such a signature. It's like your DNA. It's so complicated. It's not just word choice and humor and expression. And it's so many things, just like wine is.
Yeah.
And, I think it'll take as long for Chat GPT or the other tools to really come out with stunning literature as long as it would take AI to come up with like Chateau Margaux, perfectly aged with the right amount of oak or whatever. It's such an artisanal thing. So, but that said, I do think whether you're a writer or not, it's worth getting to know and use the tools and see how they can assist you, like the headlines, that sort of thing. There might be other ways but I'm going to make sure that I'm familiar with the tools.
Gotcha. Yeah, I should probably I've just stayed away, but out of fear.
Yeah.
Fear of I don't want to feed the beast. But you're right. It is something that I should. It's a modern world. It's not a good idea to purposely not keep up with the times, probably.
Yeah, and just dabble, just do a little bit. Even just like come up with 10 more creative headlines than this one. And you can even put your own article below it. It's indexed everything, by the way. So don't worry about, it's going to train on my data. It's training on all of it anyway, because Amazon is into AI now. They're indexing everything.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
Yay.
Let's have another glass of wine.
Okay, where were we? So let's talk more about book and the feminist plight of it all. I really thought it was interesting how you paralleled witches and what was going on with you. So for the listeners, you went through this sort of trial of your own where people were you were kind of doing what everybody else was doing and like resharing other people's reviews, but they decided you are not allowed to do it and we will demonize you for that, and went through quite a bit of strife with trolls and whatnot. And I just thought it was really interesting how you paralleled it to when people started trying like the Salem witch trials and whatnot with that
Pardon
concept. Me? How did you come up with that concept?
At the time, a lot of friends and industry colleagues were very supportive, but I asked them not to post online because they would just get mobbed. Few of them did anyway and got mobbed. But what was coming through in a lot of their emails and messages was this witch metaphor. And I thought, well, my experience is nothing like what women went through in the 18th and 19th centuries when women who are accused of witchcraft were actually burned at the stake or killed in other ways. But I thought the metaphor might work in terms of, there was one test back in colonial Salem to determine if a woman was a witch. And what you would do is you'd throw her into the pond or the local lake. And if she floated, she was definitely a witch because witches were said to reject the baptism, holy water. Oh. So if she floated, they would take her to the stake to be burned. However, if she sunk, she was not a witch, but you drowned.
Yeah.
I said, it sounds like social media. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I was just it was more the weaving in of the metaphor just to show or to kind of have this parallel track of things have changed and they haven't. Just the situations have changed. The ways of misogyny and sexism, especially in our industry, in the wine industry, are just more subtle. They're not overt, but consequences can be as devastating, So
I don't know if you saw Barbie, but the thing where Ken tries to go and get a job and he's like, but you guys have the patriarchy. And he's like, yeah, well, we do. We just hide it better now.
Yeah, exactly. So I just thought it would add another layer to the book because a lot of people are, interested in history. I'm fascinated by witches. For me, just to be upfront, a witch is a wise woman who has been through the dumpster fires of life and emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, fiercer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to raise our fists and go, yeah. But it's not that old stereotype of the hag, with the wart and the cat and whatever.
Oh, look, I got a black cat recently, and I'm thoroughly reading books on what spells I can do with him. So,
that's great. What fun. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, that's kind of why it came to me. Yeah, then the metaphor was suggested to me, but I wanted to tread very carefully and not equate my experience directly with women, as I said, of the 18th century.
It's interesting because, especially on the writer side of the wine business, like some of like the most respected wine, like Jancis Robinson, like people are women, and yet, well, like I was thinking, so I work for not to call out who I work for. I work for Vinous, right? Vinous, that one, and their panel of writers, of which I have contributed to, and I do a lot of editing for. There's like two women in a pool of men, and the women are both MWs, whereas the men seem to skate by without and I feel like, oh God, if I want, like, because I've been struggling with, am I going to apply for the MW ever? Because I'm just like, sometimes it just feels like as a woman, you have to have like that extra layer on your name before people will give you the time of day. Whereas a man just walks in and is like, I know about wine. It's like, okay, write about it. Great. Yeah, you're hired. Like, I don't know. How do you feel about all that?
Yeah, I love what Hugh Johnson said, the co-author of the Wine Atlas, along with Jancis Robinson. And he said something like, I can't get the quote exactly, but it was something like, men will always pretend to know a lot more about wine just as they do about sex, like they're experts. And it was tongue in cheek, and it was fun, and he's, I think, one of the most liberated men I've ever met. But, the writing ranks are still dominated by men. I do feel that pressure too, Elle, like in terms of having to have the qualifications. It's why, although I didn't go after an MW, I went after every darn writing award I could apply to have those credentials, right? So the sommelier certificate wasn't enough. Just writing for years and years wasn't enough. It was like, okay, I'm going to have to win as many awards as I can to prove myself. And I think a lot of women feel that way, not just in the wine industry, but in many industries, that never enough, the imposter syndrome, if you want to call it.
Oh, yeah.
It ties into perfectionism, all kinds of things that the finish line, you're always moving it out in front of yourself. You're never arrived. And I think women, not of a certain age, but who've been in the industry as long as we have, both of us, need to sometimes take a breath and say, hey, it's okay. You have arrived. And I think owning it is not only part of being more at peace with who you are, but it also gives you the strength and confidence to help those who are coming up behind us. Who the younger women, younger people of color, younger men who don't have that confidence, who don't have the credentials or the industry experience yet. But at some point, I think if you want to be useful and at peace with yourself, you kind of have to own, hey, I've arrived. I'm here. It's enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's daily.
That's hard.
And then for women, there's like the looks of it all thing where like you have to be attractive, but not too attractive, or just like try to feel okay with like, I dress kind of unconventionally, probably for like, people, I go to a lot of tastings where everyone's in a suit and I'm definitely not. And I don't know, it's another battle that I think women in particular have to fight in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Karen McNeil, I've interviewed her a few times, my podcast, Unreserved Wine Talk, and she's been great. And she said, women, like it or don't, we are in an industry where we're out at events, alcohol is involved. The men go from daytime to nighttime jobs, usually with the same suit and tie, if it's that kind of work environment. But women, it's sort of like this quasi-hybrid social environment where women are expected to change into cocktail dresses or something, quote unquote, a bit more sexy. And I think, when you're on the job, as she said, you always have to be aware that you are working.
Right.
So, take that as you will, because I think everyone should be allowed to express themselves as they want, whether it
Yeah.
is a short dress or a three-piece suit, whatever. But just be aware that
Yeah.
you're in a work environment. That's all.
At some point, I know I heard her say something like, and I met her at the Wine Writers Symposium several years ago, and the last night there's a very fancy dinner, and because I had heard what she'd said about maybe women, and I was wearing this dress that has a very low back, and she came by and she goes, "Your dress is very sexy," and I was like, "Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know." But Karen McNeil just complimented me, so I'll take it. But
Yeah. Well, good for you and good for her. And that was, like you were celebrating. It was a nice dinner.
yeah,
That's a minefield in terms of trying to,
right.
even advise young women of make sure your hemlines aren't too short or your plunging necklines, whatever. But because I think also everyone should be able to express themselves, but just realize we are
Right.
interpreted with how we present ourselves. That's all.
True. Gosh, okay. Do you have any things in particular, like things you would like to broach in particular? If not, there's a segment I do as we come to sort of the close of the chat that's called the Final Five. It's the easy breezy portion of the podcast, but I just want to make sure because I think your book is important in terms of like what all it had to say. Just want to make sure there's anything else you want to chat about before we go into the Final Five segment.
Sure. Well, Elle, I didn't intend for Wine Witch on Fire, and the subtitle is Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much to be all the dismal Ds. My publisher said, if you throw in one more D, we can't market this book. So I wasn't allowed to put depression, delirium, and destitution in there,
Oh.
much as I wanted to. Just kidding. But I didn't intend to write a self-help book with this memoir, but it's turned into that. A lot of early readers, I'm getting like emails and direct messages almost daily from those who've read the book saying how much it's helped them to moderate their own relationship with wine.
Mm.
And because we hear a lot about sober, curious, dry January on one side, and then we have the dangers of excessive drinking, of which we're increasingly aware, and memoirs of those who are addicts and so on. But we don't have much in between. I mean, what do
Yeah.
you do if you love wine, you don't want to give it up,
Mm-hmm.
but you're concerned about your relationship with it? You want to have a healthy life, a long life. So what readers are saying is that the tips that I share as I had to reevaluate my own relationship with wine, with alcohol, have helped them. So maybe I can share just a few of those with you if you're interested. Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, I had to deal with the underlying issues first. I was using wine as a crutch. I had been writing about wine for 14 years before this no good, terrible, very bad vintage. Never had a problem with excessive drinking. And so in the book, I include sessions with my therapist, and you can be a fly on the wall for that. So the first tip was deal with those underlying issues, because then the need for a drink as a way of a coping mechanism really subsided. But beyond that, another tip was asking myself, what was the thought just before the thought that said, I need a drink?
Mm.
And was it about stress? And if so, could I find another way to relieve that? Go for a walk, watch a show, take a bath. Another one, I'll just share one more. When I open a full bottle of wine, whether I'm sharing it with my husband or just having some wine on my own, I will pour half of it into a half empty bottle.
Oh.
And that makes me more mindful of how much I'm consuming. It keeps it fresh for another day because, oxygen exposure to wine is minimized if you're filling another half empty bottle. That has also helped me sort of pace myself. But there's lots more in there. And I've had some remarkable reader letters as well, just people saying, well, I had one from a woman, and I've changed all the details, the names, but she said, this is Sharon, John's wife. We lost our son, our 21-year-old son, during COVID. He took his own life, and John started hitting the bottle pretty hard. And she said, he read your book and there are other factors involved, but I do credit it to a large part in him getting back to a good relationship with wine.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's
like that's worth the book, worth writing it to have a letter like that. Yeah.
And it's good because, I mean, there are the people that need to, there are alcoholics out there who need to not drink, but there's
exactly
a lot of people who can enjoy some wine and it doesn't have to wreck your life as if you figure out how to do that. When I first started working in wine, I suddenly was consuming much more wine than I used to. And I used to, especially when I got like Zalto glasses, because they're huge. And like you think you're not, like I started like measuring when I put my wine when I put it in there, because like it looks like you put none in and it's like, oh no, this is a full pour of wine.
It can be deceiving when you've got a big one of those giant glasses that, you know, you can pour an entire bottle into them. And then after you've drained that, you can have a steam facial in them. They're so huge. But one more thing I could mention about the book is that I do mention lots of wines throughout and the stories behind the labels. So although it sounds like very much, you know, divorce, online mobbing, whatever kind of book, memoir, wine is still very much at the heart of it. It's the behind the scenes of the wine industry, the, you know, wine writers and scores and that sort of thing. But I also sprinkle a lot of wines throughout with sort of their interesting histories. And then I created a book club guide. You don't have to have a book club, though, to take advantage of this. Originally, the book had wines reviewed at the end of each chapter, but the book got too long. So we took that all out and made it a book club guide, but it's got lots more wines that I recommend for each chapter.
Oh, cool.
Tips on organizing your own wine tasting, how to pair books and bottles, spines and vines. I love doing that. It's free. And you can find it at winewitchonfire.com.
Amazing. Okay, so now we're just going to do the fun, easy final five section. These are, I say quick, but you can give as long an answer as you want. This gets transcribed and published on Delectable, so there's that. For people that don't want to listen to our voices, they can just read. The first question that I always ask people, very simple. What are you drinking these days? What are you into?
I happen to have a wine right here, Elle.
It's gorgeous.
So it's beautiful, isn't it? It's an orange wine. It's from Southbrook Vineyards, which is a biodynamic organic winery in Ontario. The winemaker is Anne Sperling, and she's a real rock star winemaker. Southbrook, it's a biodynamic organic winery. This one's made from the Vidal grape. It's skin fermented orange wine. And Anne Sperling, as I said, rock star winemaker, she pioneered the orange wine appellation. She formed the world's first orange wine appellation. And so it just gives guidelines for what is an orange wine here in Ontario. And what I love about this one, if you want some sound effects, is that it's low in alcohol, but it has these, I mean, I'm not a fan of all orange wines. I think some can taste downright weird, but this one is just beautiful. It really has these exotic flavors of like bergamot and Earl Grey tea. And I don't know, I'm a tea drinker, not a coffee drinker because of the bitterness thing.
Yeah.
But this one, it's got lots of stuffing. It's not filtered.
Such a
clementine notes. Oh. It is. Isn't that beautiful?
All right. I think we pretty much finished question number 1 of the final 5. So question number 2, this is one of your favorite topics. What is either an unusual or just a favorite pairing? And it can be actually any kind of consumable thing. I've had people pair everything from scotch and bananas to cigars and champagne. So,
wow. Okay. Well, I'll start with this Southbrook orange wine. I think it would be lovely with any sort of braised meats or caramelization on a meat. So I would go not with a traditional like chicken or fish or whatever, although it would be fine. But there's just such a nice sort of toffeed edge to this, not sweet, but just the sort of smell and taste of caramelization. But unusual pairing would be rosé and ketchup chips.
Oh,
really like that. So I know ketchup chips aren't as widespread in the US, but I think there is somebody who's making them now.
There's got to be.
Me? And at first I thought, well, with a dry rosé, I would imagine ketchup, which apparently has, like in its raw form, has more salt and sugar by volume than ice cream. I was thinking that it would be way too sweet, the chips, for the wine. But it was brilliant because the ketchup chips, at least the ones I was munching on, were actually more tomatoey and dry. They didn't taste sweet. And it was brilliant with a rosé from the Tavel, the Rhone Valley.
Tabels are
So
my favorite rosés.
I
I
love
love
that.
them so much.
Have you tried Shadow Dacaria?
Yes, yes,
D
yes.
apostrophe, yeah, D apostrophe AQ, etc. I love that one. I buy that one by the case.
Such
Just
a
I find it so good because it's got all the taste of a robust red wine without the heavy alcohol and tannin and oak. So I think it's perfect hybrid wine.
Yeah, I think they're one of the best like wintertime rosés, I think too. Just like 'cause they have so
Mhm.
much going on and such body and yeah.
They do.
Chateau Trinquevedel is my go-to when I'm buying a
Oh,
Tavel. If you've ever had them. If you haven't, you should try.
yeah, I'll look for it. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So rosé and I need to try some ketchup chips now. I've never had them.
Yes.
Um, so there's like stores for every specialty thing in LA. There's got to be like a store that sells Canadian things, probably.
Oh,
Um,
I'm sure. Yeah.
Question number three is, if not wine, what do you like to drink? And you can give me both an alcohol and a non-alcohol. Aha, you've got a nice mug
Tea.
there.
Yes, I've
Tea.
got this ember mug that keeps it hot. I love tea. I especially like green tea. The green tea I drink, though, is not bitter. So I found a brand that's not bitter and it's decaffeinated because otherwise I'm climbing the ceiling with caffeine.
You ever do
But
matcha?
no, I don't. Do you?
I mean, I've had not as a regular practice, but I like green tea. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. So green tea would be my go-to. I mean, wine, really, I don't really get into a lot of other drinks again because of the bitterness. So in the world of wine, I love rosé and Pinot Noir. So
Mm.
I know that's kind of cliche, but there you go. Not a
No,
lot of tannins.
I joke about rosé because I'm like, I'll like stock up on rosé, so to speak, and then I'm like, where'd all my rosé go? Because I'm always just like, I'm just kind of in the mood for some rosé if I'm not having to review something. But
Exactly. Yeah.
cool. Okay, question number four is, if you were to make a wine, what would you want to make, and what would you call your wine or your winery?
Well, in the book, as you know, it starts with a wine label because I kind of wanted to put a label on my book because so many labels have been put on me. I thought I'm creating my own label and it's a wine label. So I would go with that. Domaine McLean
Domain
would be the name of the winery because it rhymes. It would be a Pinot Noir because that is the heartbreak grape. And this was not a
McLean.
good vintage, but it still ends well. And I would make the Pinot in a cool climate. So it could be Carneros, it could be, the Willamette Valley, it could be Niagara, Burgundy, if I could ever afford that. But I just love Pinot because I don't know, I find it's, got that racy, edgy, nervy acidity that it always strikes me as a grape on the edge of a nervous breakdown. And I like that in my grapes and my people. I find it's so much more interesting where it could teeter one way or the other. You just don't know what you're going to get. And, if I was at a party, I would be going over and talking to that Pinot Noir that's already sort of starting to cry in the corner because I think the conversation would be so much more interesting than the Cabernet with the tuxedo on at the, hors d'oeuvre table. So, yeah, Pinot all the way.
Awesome. Question number five is the same question I've been asking guests since the show started, and it doesn't have to relate to wine, although it can if you want. And it's just, what's bringing you joy these days?
Well, what's bringing me joy is the book is done, it's written, and the book baby is out in the world, and it's the reader letters that I'm getting. I mean, I shared one with you, but I think when you share from the heart and with vulnerability and put all your warts out there, what comes back to you is surprising. And what comes back to you is richer, deeper stories and connection. It started with friends when I first told them what was going on, friends and family. We weren't talking anymore just about our kids' soccer lessons or whatever. They told me about times when they had been, whatever, gone through something. And it just took friendship to a whole deeper level. So now that's happening on a much grander scale or larger scale with the book because readers feel like they know me, and that's fine. And they're telling me these deeply moving personal stories on email or direct messages, as I mentioned. It just moves me because I think what we want to do, whether it's with wine or with writing, or whatever we do, it's connection with other people. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to reach out to someone and say, I see you, I see you struggle. We're in it together. So that's what's meant the most to me. And it's definitely what's making me happy.
Beautiful. Well, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you, if you do the social medias, where they can follow you, all that good stuff?
Sure. I'll point people to my website because all the social media handles are there. The easy URL to remember is Wine Witch on Fire because it'll redirect to my website, which is nataliemclean.com. But there are all sorts of ways to misspell that, but you can put both if you like in the show notes. Winewitchonfire.com. You'll find out about the book, the free book club guide that you don't have to have a book club for. But I also teach online wine and food pairing courses that are a lot of fun. And I have the podcast, Unreserved Wine Talk. So wherever you're listening to this wonderful podcast with Elle, you can also find mine, add it to your playlist. I have a newsletter and so on. But please connect with me, reach out to me, whether it is via my website, on social media. You're also welcome to email me, natalie@nataliemclean.com. But again, winewitchonfire.com, you'll get in touch easily that way too.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Oh, Elle, thank you for all your great questions. And thanks for introducing me to your cat and your FedEx guy. And it was a really busy session, but I liked it. No, this is great. I really appreciate this. I love that we went off into a few different tangents because it makes it more interesting, than the usual narrative. So thank you for asking such great questions.
Well, I'm happy to have you be a part of it.
All right. Well, cheers. I raise my glass to you. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our chat with Ellen. In the show notes, you'll find the full transcript of my conversation with her, links to her website and podcast, the video versions of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live, and where you can order my book online now, no matter where you live. You can also find a link to take a free online food and wine pairing class with me. It's called The 5 Wine and Food Pairing Mistakes That Can Ruin Your Dinner and How to Fix Them Forever at nataliemclean.com/class. That's all in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/277. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or if you've read my book or are in the process of reading it at natalie@nataliemclean.com. If you missed episode 242, go back and take a listen. I chat about how artificial intelligence will change the wines you drink with AI expert Dina Blekshen. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
There's a lot of research that's going on right now by the company called Cubata. And what this company is doing, it's pairing up with vineyards and it's sending robots through the vineyards that take pictures of the grapes. And based on those pictures, they're trying to figure out whether the grapes or the wine, the trees are actually getting enough water. So here AI is determining whether the grapes themselves are getting enough water.
Far more sophisticated because different grapes probably have different levels of ability to absorb moisture. So looking at the grape health and the leaf health is far more sophisticated and actually going right to the grapes and the leaves. I would think that's far more accurate. You won't want to miss next week when we chat with Master of Wine Natasha Hughes, who is working on a book on Beaujolais. She shares some surprising insights about the region that should be known for much more than Nouveau when she joins us from her home in London. If you liked this episode or even learned one thing from it, please email or tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in learning more about the stories I shared. It's easy to find my podcast. Just tell them to search for Natalie McLean Wine on their favorite podcast app, or they can listen on my website. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a wine made by a human woman. I am just trying to wrap all the themes into one glass here. This is still Natalie, not AI. For now. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media.
So subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.